I want to take the time today to talk about what I find to be the most attractive quality in a person. This is the feature in people that no matter what, across the board, whether it's a platonic relationship, a friendship, someone who I just always feel like I want to be around, who I want to have more time with in my life, someone who I'm romantically attracted to, there's always this same feature that I always come back to with people. I just notice that it is the underpinning, it is the bottom line of what I find to be most attractive in people across the board. Like I said, this is one of those things that can be both a romantic attraction and it can be one of those things that's also just in friendship or a mentorship. There's this certain quality that I think when people become self-aware of it, I do think it's a little bit of an Uncle Ben thing. I think once you're aware of what this is, that I'm going to be talking about today, it is something that you want to handle with care because it can turn on itself and it can end up actually begetting more of the opposite of itself. I'll talk a bit about that as we get into it. But nevertheless, there is this core quality that I feel like every highly attractive person seems to hold, just in my limited experience in life. It's something that I've always observed and I feel like would be useful to share with you here. Okay, so this quality, the most attractive quality in everyone across the board that I've ever met, who I've ever been highly attracted to, is honesty. Right? Honesty, authenticity. Another way of saying it that I really like is self-ownership. In life, we tend to gravitate towards the things that we are most competent in, right? We tend to draw our own internalized sense of confidence in a situation from the things that we feel the most skilled in. We have a natural aversion to the unknown. And we don't want to put ourselves in situations where we are seen to be incompetent and we feel like beginners. Even though if we really want to get good at anything, even if we are already quite skilled or quite advanced in a certain area, we do always want to have a beginner's mindset to some degree, right? There's a reason in martial arts they say that you do always really want to have your white belt on still. Because it doesn't matter how far you get in something, if you lose the beginner's mindset, you're susceptible to closing yourself off from what comes next. So it's really important to keep that openness, but still it makes sense that we gravitate towards the areas that we're most competent in, right? That's where our confidence tends to come from. Without going into an hour and a half psychoanalytic musing, not that I'm particularly qualified to do that anyway, but I thought about it a lot. When we go into these areas of competence, when we move into them, what can happen a lot of the time, I've noticed this in myself, and I think that virtually every and anyone will go through this. Once we find the things that we tend to be good at, the things that we have a natural strength in, particularly if our culture and our society rewards those things. For example, if you're highly industrious and you're very good with business, which is a character trait that some people have. Some people are very industrious, they're very conscientious, they're very good with being orderly, they're very good with keeping stuff in time. They might not have a very rich inner life, for example. They might not be someone who can pick up on the subtlety of a cult fiction novel. But they very well might conquer and subjugate in the business world. Now, if the society and the culture rewards what you're competent in, that's something that I think you're even more likely to bear down on. I think people who tend to have aptitudes for things that are more unique and don't necessarily fit in the common noosphere, these people tend to struggle more and they tend to have to spend a lot more time just getting to a baseline in those areas that they're naturally maybe not so competent in and maybe a little bit deficient in. But generally speaking, we gravitate towards the things. That's my grandfather on his quad bike. Typically speaking, we gravitate towards the things that we're most competent in. But what can happen is when we start to burrow down or narrow in on the things that we're most competent in, we can become very lopsided. And what tends to happen is we want to sort of extricate ourselves from everything that we're not so good at. Right. So again, let's take the example of the business tycoon. You know the type. These are the kinds of people where when you look into their personal life stories, they tend to struggle a lot in their intimate relationships. This is a common trope. Like this is not a surprise to anyone, but a lot of people who are very form oriented and very worldly can struggle with the internal landscape of life, right? It's just that when that's reversed, you wouldn't hear about it as much, like say, because the people who have a high aptitude for their internal life and for the quality of making connections with people and emotional maturity, let's say, these don't tend to be people who are plastered all over the news. They're more like your friendly neighborhood empaths. You probably know them in your life, but they don't tend to. Not all heroes wear capes, right? So if you take the idea of this business tycoon, right, this is someone who in a lot of ways might be very competent and very successful, but that level of competence and success and power that comes with that can, in certain cases, cast a pretty large shadow. And that shadow can be pain and difficulty in personal life. And a way, theoretically, this is an accusation for anyone, but theoretically a way of coping with that might be to just try to throw more money or something that you attain from the area of competence, more money or more power at the issue so it can go away, so you can subjugate it, right? You want to have control over the issue so you don't really have to deal with it. But when you do things like that, this is just something I've always noticed. It sounds kind of like an old wives' tale, intuitive thing, but it's something that I've always noticed across the board. The people around you, especially if they're your real ones, if they're your ride or die homies, your family, your closest friends, your partner, if there's love in your relationship, people have a very finely tuned sense to your authenticity as a person, right? So although there might be a bunch of people around that, I know I'm harping on this business tycoon example, but we'll finish that up in a sec. If there are people sort of like sucking off of that business tycoon like a leech, they're probably not going to care about how authentic or how in alignment that guy's personality is with his soul or his higher purpose, right? That's not really something that people are going to be bothered by most of the time if they're just using you to utilize their own needs. But the people around you who care about you for you, and they actually have an innate sense of they give a fuck about your evolution as a person, as a soul, in this life. These are the people who are going to be monitoring, usually subconsciously. I'm not saying people are just like scanning, was that truthful or not? But there's an internal dial or a thermostat that registers authenticity from people. And this is something that we always have. And to go back to the initial statement, when I meet people, even if these people are in disarray in their life, I've met 2 or 3 people in my life who are not in a good situation, but I've been very attracted to them because they have ownership over their situation. Because the area that they might not be competent in this case, just having their life together in general, they take ownership over it. They don't just narrow, like sort of like suction cup onto the things they're good at, but then have like a shadow area of the things they're bad at, or the flaws or the areas that they're imperfect in, right? We are a product of original sin. At the end of the day, we do have innate imperfection in us. And when someone's sphere of awareness is bright enough or large enough to encompass and include all of those things that are not so pretty about them and their life, the areas that they're not so good and their areas of competence, the fusion of all that creates for a very magnetic and very bright kind of personality, right? And I've always noticed myself just attracted to that like a moth, like a flame to people. If you always see people sort of saying like, what is the thing that you'll find most attractive in people? What's a turn on or a turn off? I would actually go ahead and make a bold claim that I think when you really listen to what people say is attractive, like maybe outside of certain physical traits, when you really listen to what people are saying is the most attractive things they find in people, it's usually that this person has a strong sense of character and they have a sense of self-ownership. The way they relate to themselves and the way they relate to their lives has something very unique and authentic to them as a character. And there's something about it that's just absolutely irresistible a lot of the time, right? Because you could have someone who, by all accounts has their life together. It may be someone who's very successful, maybe even someone who's very intelligent, but if they emanate a sense of insecurity and they emanate a sense of not really being able to take ownership of their own character, right? That you can feel that in people over time. That's something that you start to sense. So being able to take ownership of your own character, again, this isn't some Protestant definition of honesty where it's just like, I always tell the truth and I never speak a lie. Like, obviously you don't want to be lying to the people around you, worst of all lying to yourself. But honesty extends beyond the colloquial definition that we have for it, right? This sense of just like, oh, okay, yeah, honesty is just not speaking lies. It's like, no, that's just the surface. That's the top layer of honesty. The actual cake, the thing that's underneath, is really how you got the sense of self-ownership or the sense of self-governance that you have. It's leading an honest life. You know, when you do something that is just for a good purpose, you don't do it so you can get likes on Instagram. You don't do it so you can tell people around you how great it was that you did it. But when you just do something that you knew was the right thing, and it strangely turns out to be one of the biggest confidence boosters that you can find. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. You'll do something that's just of a good nature. You don't need to tell anyone about it, but you'll feel inside of yourself there's this enduring sense of, I use the word confidence, but I think it's just knowing that you have that good in you. And I think what happens at a deeper level is it abates a sort of subconscious sense of self-conflict that I think a lot of us have around if we're actually good or worthy. Because in that moment, we know that we did the right thing. And that's really the honesty that I'm talking about on a self level. But like I said, it can also be for the bad things. Like if you're struggling with something in life, like in my case, for example, I struggle on and off with an eating disorder. I struggle with binge eating. I have since I was probably about 15. And it's awful sometimes the way that presents in my life. It really does run me into the ground. And for a long time, I never wanted to tell anyone about that. In fact, when I lived with my old housemates, one of my housemates is my best friend to this day. He's like a brother to me. He found out about my binge eating because the whole bin outside of our house was like stuffed with like whole cake containers, bags of chips, like multiple 2-liter Coke bottles. And it was funny because on the surface, I was in really good shape. I would go to the gym every day. I was walking everywhere. I looked lean and fit, and it was just weird. It was like, whoa, like, where's all this coming from? And it was just because I was too ashamed to say anything about it. And over time, I've learned that that's something that I can be open with people. And I've never, ever been, sure, people might criticize the behavior because it can be kind of crazy in my case. But actually taking ownership of it has made dealing with it a lot easier in life because it's something that I feel like I can hold and it doesn't feel like it's going to break my back, right? I'm not afraid of it as much because it feels like it is just part of the fact that I'm not perfect. Where back then, this is just one example, obviously, like the business tycoon example. Back then, I felt like if I picked up that weight, it would break my back. Where now I feel like I know that I can lift it, but I still struggle with it sometimes, if that makes sense. Anyway, tying up this and summarizing, the most attractive quality in a person across the board, in my humble opinion, is self-ownership, right? Character, self-governance, authenticity. Being able to have a sphere of ownership over the fact that you have flaws and imperfections, but also that you have talents and skills and aptitudes in life, and being able to align that honestly. When you can speak honestly to other people and you express yourself in a way that's authentic to who you are, and you take ownership of your own emotions and your own thoughts and your own, your own flaws and imperfections, whatever they may be. We're all unique little snowflakes in that respect. When you can take ownership of that, there's something that's communicated to the people around you, new people in your life and the people who are already in your life, where they can sense a sturdiness that is very magnetic. And I would say that's sort of like a subtle universal law. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that you can pick up what I'm putting down. You can resonate with it. If you did and you're new here, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing this to anyone you feel like would get value out of it. This is the first video I've done in a couple months. I've been traveling around Japan for like the 3rd time in a year. But I've been thinking about doing a video over the last couple weeks, and I thought I would just jump back into it with no script and just give a classic Express This style monologue after a couple of coffees this morning. So hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I'm going to see you soon because I'm going to be doing this hopefully once a week at least in the future coming up. So hope you're having a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.